go. Hello, Tom Vecchia here with the latest edition of the Armchair NBA. Today, we got a very, very, very special guest in the house today. Dee Snider, happy birthday to you, and welcome to the Armchair NBA. How you doing today?
I'm doing great, man. I'm in my favorite place in the world, our house in Belize on the beach. Literally, there's the Caribbean right there, 75 feet from where we're speaking. This is my office down in Belize, so under the Palapa. So, so I couldn't be happier.
I love it. When Dee and I, we don't do that many now because we got a lot of the work done. Where we would do our Zoom calls, I would see the ocean in the back and see the water in the back and the palm trees. I'm like, damn, I got to come visit you sometime,
Yeah.
So I want to jump right in, Dee, because a lot of people know about you. But one thing about Dee, which I always found funny, was first again, happy birthday. He shares the same birthday as my sister, which is the Ides of March 15th. So everybody wish happy birthday to Dee in the chat, and again, welcome for that. So I want to start off. Tell us about your formative years, because it's funny because anybody when I mention your name, and there was a few stories I think I told you where I'll know a person well, and I like them and trust them. And they'll say, oh, my God, Dee grew up with my aunt in Fair Lawn, New Jersey. He grew up with somebody in Pennsylvania. There's like 20 D's out there. So just set it straight. Tell us about your formative years, where you grow up, and kind of how and what made you, Yeah,
it's always regrettable when these people come up to me and they've got their story. And it's amazing. And I have to inform them that it's not true. I was at my son's football game a number of years ago. And the coach for the team goes, I know the guy who coached you in football in Santa Mauritius. And I said, A, never lived in Santa Mauritius. B, never played football. So I'm sorry, but your friend is under misinformed. That wasn't me. So I grew up on Long Island, New York, lower middle class family, family of 6. The oldest of 6, and what this is really pertinent. I was the oldest child in the entire family, meaning for a brief moment in time, I was the golden child. I was Simba. I was the circle of life. My parents held me up, and the other brothers and sisters and grandparents gathered around to see this miracle of nature, the first Snider. Whoa. And then they started having children like it was a competition. And within 9 months, everybody in the family was having kids. And it was like, okay, take care of yourself now. I was like, whoa, I thought I was Simba. And I really believe, I've had, shrinks tell me, well, this was, you don't remember being Simba, but certainly having that attention taken from you, all on you at one point, and then taken from you and shifted to dozens of other kids as the times when my mother had 6 and 8 years, so really had me starved for that attention again. So I was always just looking for attention, and that's what led me to the world of rock and roll.
So that's what brings me to my next question is, how did you find music? How did you find rock and roll?
Two events. One was Glee Club. I joined the Glee Club at a young age in school, and it was a solo, and they were auditioning voices. People, because in elementary school, everybody's in Glee Club. That's one of the few things back in the 60s that everybody, like now, everybody gets a trophy. Back then, everybody could sing. And then they slowly figured out, well, you actually can't sing. And so they were auditioning kids for solo. And I was auditioning. In the middle of my audition, the music teacher stopped playing.
Oh, wow.
And she actually stopped the pianist and said, stop. And she said, this boy sings like a bird. And I was like, what? Like I sing like a bird? Like I didn't. And I got the solo. And doing a solo in elementary school and seeing the response from the audience, again, the attention, I was like, I was special. I was being singled out, and I was not a special kid as a rule. I wasn't particularly athletic or particularly smart or particularly talented. One thing, I could sing like a bird. That's what he said. So that became my thing. Then when the Beatles were on the Ed Sullivan Show in 1964, I didn't actually see them. My father had banned television in our house, so he felt we needed to get back to doing things like puzzles and building models and reading. So while the world was being changed that fateful Sunday in February in 1964, I was building an effing puzzle. But the effect on the school kids was so great that when I got to school that day, everybody was talking about it. And I was just like, what is this thing? And they were explaining it because I'm like third grade. And they're like, it's a rock band. What's a rock band? And I just heard, these guys, and they were singing and playing. And I just heard these words. Everybody was screaming. And I remember hearing those words and turning to Russell Niederman, I said, I'm going to be a Beatle. And I didn't know what it was or what I had to do. But if everybody's screaming, I'm going to be that guy. I quickly found out I couldn't be a Beatle. I had to be a musician. I had to be in a band. And again, it was all about the attention.
Interesting. So I have a feeling that you weren't as simple as, like, not to knock metal is obviously a certain genre and you need to be talented. But to me, you were always a musician as well. You were always a singer as well. So how did you kind of develop into the musician that you became earlier on in your career?
Well, my wife always says I've always sold myself short because I didn't want to take the hard. And I remember working with a voice teacher who, again, that moment where they stopped. This is in my, in my mature age. I was actually coming off of a throat surgery, and she stopped playing and said, "You have an amazing instrument. You could have done anything you wanted to do with your voice." And so I was classically trained the first, through high school and until I was in college for 1 year. I was always at the same time singing rock and roll, and they're very different. Classical is diaphragm, rock and roll is all in the face. It's all in the muscles up here. It's all up in this area. But I was singing, always singing. And yeah, I'm blessed in that way. I mean, I did a show on Broadway called Rocktopia, and it was a mix-up of classical and rock and roll. And there was one point in the show where I broke into operatic singing.
Yes.
And it brought the house down. Nobody expected this guy, this screamer, to sing opera. But again, it's just I've been blessed with an instrument, and it's been my like key to my success.
Well, the other part I think people get wrong about you is you didn't leave many hotel rooms turned over. You weren't a drinker. You weren't a drugger. You got married young, got a beautiful wife. You're like almost boring in a sense. So give us kind of like how it was the real, what people thought of Dee Snider, who they thought you were, and then who are you really?
I am boring, in a traditional sense. It's just that what I do for a living is pretty damn exciting. So to me, it's funny. I would first of all, I didn't drink or do drugs. I had a bad alcohol experience at 14, and just said, well, it was my first time drinking, and I at 14, and rather than have a drink, I drank until I was laying on the floor, paralyzed. And and that the little sober voice that's inside the drunk head said, "Dear Lord, if you let me walk again, I swear off demon alcohol." And I got to turn that off, man, because that is going to be really annoying. Let's get rid of that. Sorry, guys. I seem to have some kind of I don't want to do that to you. I've got my damn email on. People are still wishing me happy birthday. Thank you, everybody, for wishing me happy birthday. If I know I'm still relevant because I'm still, well, I'm either relevant or people are too lazy to remove me from the famous birthdays list and all the newspapers. It's like it's still on the page. My father's like 92. You're still on the list. I'm like, yeah, Dad, still on the list. In Newsday, yeah. So, but I digress here. What we were talking about before I interrupted. What was that?
So what are the again?
Hotels. Yeah. So but the realization at 14 was that I can't control myself. That my first drinking wasn't, it was just like, oh my God, I had a beer. No, it was whiskey sours, paralyzed.
Yeah.
And I sort of took that to drugs when the opportunity came up. I said, you know what, you can't, you drink. I mean, I was drinking like 4 pots of coffee a day. And then I would have a couple of big ones from Dunkin' Donuts. So it was like 18 cups a day. I have to do everything to the extreme. So no drugs, no alcohol. And then all that rock and roll stuff, traditional rock and roll, I was thought it just seemed kind of stupid and lame and not very cool at all. And maybe I was too cool to have fun. But the idea of throwing a TV out the window is like, why?
Yeah.
Then you have no TV. I'm going to be in this room for 24 hours. I want to watch damn TV. So I just sort of had I had a have it your way mentality about I thought that was acceptable. Like I wanted to have a wife, I wanted to have kids, I wanted to rock. I thought all of those things were reasonable in the rock and roll world. Later found out, on the whole, people want lifestylers. They don't want people like me who are clean, sober, married, and have their lives together in a house in Belize. They were the guys who were living out of their cars. We had it all. Now we're living out of a car. Not me. Not me.
But which brings me to one of the other things I've always admired about you, probably because you were clean and sober, is you always had a good head about the business, and you weren't like too businessy, but you weren't like as far as I know, the guy who got screwed. So give us kind of like, what was your strategy, being an artist, but then also not being like the naive artist, if that makes sense.
Well, I'm actually the guy who screwed himself. I lost everything by the early 90s. I didn't lose it. I knew where it was. I just spent it all and had to sell everything else. But I couldn't blame anybody but myself because there was no fingers to point. I couldn't say someone stole it from me, that managers or agents, and I couldn't say that I was drunk or stoned. And I didn't know. I knew where every dollar went. I was just living like a rock star, and I didn't want to give up the lifestyle. As things started to slip away when grunge came in, and you're burning through the money, you keep thinking that next album's going to do it, that next tour is going to do it, and it didn't. So I actually wound up, losing everything and having to start all over. And I'm doing now, but it was a pretty dark time there in the 90s, where I was riding a bicycle to a desk job answering phones for a couple $100 a week. And this was like 90.
You were super famous at the time, though. You were really Dee Snider.
So people would come in the office and see me there. Hey, are you Dee Snider? And I would lie and say no. And they just couldn't fathom that this guy was actually there. So they go, oh my God, it's like amazing. I say, yeah, right. If only I was him, right? But that was, it was brutally humbling. And but hey, I had 3 kids already at that point. And you either do this, or you get on your bicycle and figure out what you're going to do to feed your kids. And that's what I did. And that's, but I realized, it's funny because I realized one of the advantages of not being drunk or high, I had no problem letting myself go. I had no problem dancing like nobody's there. Dance like nobody's there. I was a freak show. My friends used to say, we don't want to see you high. Like if this is you sober, I wouldn't want to know what you're going to be like if you're high. So, but it also gave me this amazing advantage, because as crazy as I got in the clutch, if something happened, and things did happen, whether it was violent things or police moments or whatever, I was sober like that. And I had all my faculties, and I was able to deal with every situation. I found that to be an advantage. And so, and that also works with just in general, in situations where you have your faculties about you, your brain cells are still intact, and you can make the right choices. Well, not always. Obviously, I rode a bicycle to a desk job, so I didn't make all the right choices.
Well, so here's the thing, though. It's all part of your journey, and there's a lot to unpack there. But one thing I do want to ask, though, is, you were innovative and disruptive in, the metal scene, the hair bands, that kind of stuff. And then obviously grunge came along, and obviously retrospect, hindsight's 2020. But was it a slow grind, like a slow, like oh shit, you know what? Like less people showing up, and then less listens, or did grunge kind of hit you like a side swipe and you didn't see it coming? Not just you, but the overall genre? Because I'm like in between there in terms of age, but I'm just wondering what your perspective was on that transition from kind of hairband to the grunge.
Well, no one saw it coming, but I was already dead and semi-buried before
Yeah.
grunge hit. Twisted, arrived in the early '80s,
Yeah.
and then we hit our stride in the mid '80s, and by the late '80s, the band had broken up, and I had a band called Desperado that got shelled by Electro Records. I spent a lot of money was spent on that record, but I was sort of already removed as a featured artist by that point, and I was struggling trying to find my footing with Desperado, and then Widowmaker, and then grunge hit, and then I got the letter in the mail, certified letter. Dear Mr. Snider, we are no longer doing what you do. We don't look like you, sound like you, sing like you, write like you, perform like you. We actually don't want anything to do with anything you ever did. Sincerely, the music buying public.
Wow.
And that's when the bottom really fell out, where you can't, imagine being a doctor who studied a form of medicine that they found a cure for. Like you're a cancer specialist. Specialist is what you dedicate your life to, and they get a pill that cures tomorrow. Out of work. Grunge cured hair metal. So, and I was out of work.
Wow. So now that you were in the bottom, riding the bike to work, but still had some fame, how did you reignite that spark and get back on track financially with your celebrity and kind of building yourself back up? How did you do it, Dee?
It's interesting. I saw a business magazine article about branding, and they cited me as a great example of branding. Yeah, and they went through my whole career and how I, I sort of rose up, from where I had been and established my name and applied it to whether it's films or radio or everything I've done. You'll see Dee Snider name, and I'm reading the article. I go, that's fantastic. If only it was true. It was no plan. I always tell people it was 10% inspiration and 90% desperation. You wake up that day, you realize you have 3 kids, you have no income. I had one year I had $0 income, zero on my tax return, 2 bankruptcies. And like you said, what can I do? And basically it's just say yes to everything. Want to answer phones at a desk job? Yes. You want to manage a recording studio? Yeah, I'll do that. You want to work with a toy company? And yes, I'll do that. I just, and somebody said, you got a good voice, so you could do voiceover. I'll do that. So I started, going out on auditions, and now I have a career in voiceover. You'd be good on radio. Yes, I'll do that. Sunday nights, broadcasting the fish, as they used to say, midnight to 2 a.m., midnight to 1 a.m. on a local radio station. That's where I started doing radio 30 years ago. But now I'm, a 6-figure radio guy, and I've been doing it for decades. So, but it was no grand plan. It was just like any opportunity I had, I just said yes to. If it was ability, it might lead to money to pay the bills and to feed my kids and my family.
Well, you know what? We all love a good comeback story. But one of the things that I found interesting, though, is you held on to the catalog for a while. So you had the catalog during that time. It just wasn't harvesting, correct? So, was that the case? I still think at this point you had your catalog, correct? You own your catalog, right?
By the time I went for the second bankruptcy, and the second bankruptcy was not me, by the way, it was my wife, because when you're married, you can't take certain things from your wife. So she gets some things, aspects, because you had children and you're married. But then that still wasn't climbing out of that hole. Another bankruptcy, and I tried to sell my catalog. I couldn't give it away. It was the height of grunge. There was so little interest in the music of the 80s. No one would even consider it. I'll tell you, the person that come up to me with nothing. I think 25 grand would have bought my catalog. Fortunately, nobody wanted it, and things turned around.
Wow!
And it's pretty publicly known that I sold it for a lot of money to Universal, and like set you up for life. And We're Not Gonna Take It, I Want to Rock are 2 of the most licensed songs of the 80s. So so they but here, like I said, Nobody even wanted it, and just gave it to me in the bankruptcy because it was useless. It was worthless.
So before we get back to the business end, and I'm not just saying this, dude, I'm not just saying this. I want to rock top 100 songs ever.
This is your opinion, or somebody said
my opinion. I want to know what you think. I have it in the top 50, but I don't want to pull you up. But do you have it in the top 100 all time?
You know, that's a tough one. I certainly, being a fan of music, it's often hard to tout your own songwriting or whatever. And you know, I do know that We're Not Gonna Take It as transcends even that category. It's a folk song, and We're Not Gonna Take It is known the world over. I joke, if you went into the jungles of Africa and came upon a tribe and said, "We're not going to take it," they would respond, "No, we ain't going to take it." But it's almost totally true. It's just crazy how that song has just taken on a different life of its own. So I want to rock. Is it? I don't know, but I'm glad that people just, you know, as my manager says, if you're only going to have two big songs, make them doozies. And those two songs have been everything.
Love it. Now, in terms of the business end, right? So you sold the catalog for a good number, and you know, I think I know you give it back end and all that kind of fun stuff, but you did well on it, right? But my big question, I always wanted to ask you this actually, is with the streaming and everything else, I've heard two extremes. One extreme, like, damn, the streaming, you know, now everything's streamed and a boatload of money comes in. But then I'm hearing like from other artists like that kept the catalog, they're making peanuts because the streaming is much less in the discography. I know you're a smart guy. Did you model it out and be like, shit was right move with streaming? Or like, are you kicking yourself in the butt saying, man, I could have made a few extra bucks if I kept it? Where do you land on that?
Streaming sucks. Streaming's worthless. Worthless. You know, again, case in point, remember Psy, Gangnam Style?
Yeah.
He had 1 million streams.
Yeah.
He got $40,000.
Wow. So you too.
No, not 1 million. I'm sorry, not 1 million. Billion. I'm sorry, I said billion. A billion streams.
Jeez.
And he got $40,000. A billion, people. Okay. Wow. You saw what the a-hole from Spotify said when people complained about how little they pay us. He said, hey, put out more music. Like it's Coca-Cola. And you just have to turn up production. You know, there's no creative element. They're just, hey, make more music, you make more money. So no, it's not. I mean, unless you're in the, I don't know, say you're in this, who's in a higher category than 1 billion streams? Yeah. I don't know who's higher than that. But
Drake level,
you know, those, even, you know? Yeah. And the sad thing though is that the bands today, the young bands, they don't expect to make money. So if they're streaming into the hundreds of thousands or whatever, that allows them to work, and that's where they make their money, going out and doing shows. Because the clubs now, and I'm giving people insight here, this is true, they're booking via streaming, so they're seeing who has a following in their area. So it's like throwing. So you could play. Oh, this band's got a following in Minnesota, Minneapolis, and they've got one in Atlanta, and they've got one in Hartford, Connecticut. Well, that's 3 shows they can book, because they may not have a lot of streams in other areas, but at least they can work in those areas because the clubs feel, or the venues feel, they can reach. It's all target marketing. That's why there's no rock stars anymore. Yep. Because there's no rock star, because everything's target marketed. So unless you're in that marketplace for that type of sound, you may not even know about bands who are quite popular, very popular within the target audience. In the old days, you know, there was billboards on sides of buses and hanging over Times Square, and you know, MTV played everybody. So even if you weren't a fan of Twisted Sister, you were exposed to Twisted Sister. So we don't have that anymore. Now everything's very specific, very targeted.
If you want to hear something, well, you kind of touched on this. You kind of hit the nail on the head. Guys like me, the nerd marketing guys, are using AI to say, hey, you know, Live Nation or whatever, okay, where can we make more money for regional shows? Okay, D, you're popular here. You're going to play here. You play there. And I'll go one step further. There is even AI being used to what sound people may like in certain areas. And artists will make that music to fit that bill, which is insane. It's like almost like programmatic music, which takes away from the art. But anyway, I digress. So okay.
No, everything is no, you're not. That's not digressing at all. Everything is algorithm driven these days. So it's incredible. It's terrifying. But for one, and I say this to artists, don't play the game. Don't play the algorithm game. Don't try to figure out how you can work the formula. Make your music, and just as always, what is real, what is genuine, what connects with people will rise above. It will. And let people like Tom work the program, the algorithms, and figure out where you can play. But it's got to come from here. I see people like my sister-in-law. I hope she's not paying attention to this, but she wrote a book, and she had a whole program that told her step by step, gave her names, gave her locations, said, all right, now you've got to go here, and it just guided her whole book. And I'm saying, and I write books, I write screenplays, and I say, if it's a good story, all those beats, all those pieces will just be there naturally, because a good story or a good song has all those pieces to it already. You don't got to sit there and go, well, now I need the perfect chorus. You're either going to have a great chorus or you're not. We're not going to take it, just flew out of my brain to a tape one day. And I sat with that thing going, where did that come from? And I sat with it for 3 years trying to finish that song. When I finally finished it, it became the song of my life. But it wasn't because I sat there and said, well, what words are going to resonate and what melodic, and by the way, now I've analyzed it. Elton John was once explaining that most of his songs are based on hymnal chordal patterns, which have a certain resonation with audiences from familiarity in their Christian youth. And I sang in the church choir until I was 19. So we're not going to take it, has a hymn-like pattern to it. And I go, well, there you go. It was just ingrained in my brain, and I fed it back. But here it is as a rock and roll song and not a church hymn.
Wow. The other thing I wanted to touch on is you always you're very, again, I know you're through bankruptcies and some hard times. So once you bounce back, you've always been very resilient. Here's what I mean. Just when you kind of think Dee is dead, Celebrity Apprentice, fast forward, Cobra Kai, you always, in my opinion, maybe had bumps and bruises, but you always had a steady state of relevancy. And that's what I always appreciated about you. How do you think you've always kind of stayed a little more relevant than a lot of your maybe former colleagues that, are not doing as well?
Well, there was part 2 to that article on branding. They say that this is all part of my grand plan. The reality is it's just been dumb luck. And partially my refusal to leave. I just don't know when I've overstayed my welcome. And they just want me to have a couple of hits, say, okay, thank you very much, move on. And I'm like Ralphie on the slide when he sees Santa, and Santa gives him the push down the slide, and he just stops on the slide, and he's fighting his way back up. He goes, no, I want a Red Ryder BB gun. Well, I still want the Red Ryder BB gun, so I refuse to go down the slide and lay at the bottom in the pile of kids down there. Really, the Cobra Kai thing, again, these things that launched me into the Zeitgeist. I met Billy Zabka years ago at a convention. We became friendly, and he called me up one day before the Netflix thing started. They were still on YouTube. He says, hey, man, want to be on the show? I'm like, sure, Bill. I hadn't even seen the show. So I go down through the show, fun. I knew Mike as well. The next thing you know, COVID hits, and binge watching's a thing, and people are binge watching Cobra Kai, and I'm right there. And people are like, oh my God. A couple of weeks ago, I made a little tweet, and for the life of me, I can't figure out the damn algorithm on that one. And I said, talked about the Ukrainians using "we're not going to take it" and the difference between, anti-maskers and people fighting for their lives in Ukraine. And the way I worded it just resonated, and it exploded. I was in every newspaper internationally.
Wow.
The BBC, everybody wanted to talk to me. The guy from the big hair guy from the 80s, suddenly I become, and again, it's just I refuse to just go quietly into the night. And every now and then I just sort of get lucky throwing the darts and I hit one. I'm like, yes, he's back. So reality TV, that was another crazy thing. So just doing reality TV, too much reality TV.
So, but, and I got to give you props though. This isn't new to you. What was it? The Senate. I remember as a kid, Senate committee or whatever it was. You stood publicly and were like, "Listen, I'm taking the government head on." You literally weren't going to take it. Talk us through that.
Well, that's another thing, So let's go beforehand. We're out. It's 1984. We're on the road. We're Twisted Sister. I'm getting busted in Amarillo, Texas, for profanity, and and we got all sorts of protests and parents, and and I'm just in the middle of it, and there's something going on in the background about some senators' wives who started a group and wanted to rate records, and it just goes. It's the Reagan era. So we get people. We're playing arenas, and there's Christian groups walking around chanting the arena, trying to bring down the walls of Jericho. They want to collapse using these words that brought down to collapse the arena onto 12,000 kids in order to kill Twisted Sister.
Jesus.
And I mean, where's even if that was possible, why on earth would you want to do that? I assume their kids were in there too. But anyway, so this is. So I get back and we're recording the album and a call comes in. I don't know who. Would I want to testify? And I'm like, yeah. But I'm like not actively political. I was like, yes. They're calling me Filthy 15. I'll go do it. But I just got a call and said yes. I've learned, by the way, people, it's key to things. Say yes. Figure it out later. Figure it out later. And I don't mean fake it to you. You there?
Yeah. I call it FIFO. Figure it the F out. FIFO.
Well, yeah, I don't mean fake it till you make it. That's different. It's just correct. Like, okay, yes, and all right, how do I do this? And there's plenty of videos on YouTube. So, how am I going to do this? I can do this. I like when they asked me to be on Broadway in Rock of Ages. I wasn't my thing. I never did that thing. And they came up to me at the grand premiere of Rock of Ages and said, "Hey, what would you think about being in the show?" I said, "Yeah, sure." 2 years later, I'm on safari with my family in the jungles of Africa. A satellite phone comes out. Your manager's on the phone. I'm like, Phil, come on, man. This is like my wife's birthday. This is a trip of a lifetime. What are you doing? He goes, "You're in." I'm like, "I'm in what?" He goes, "Rock of Ages." Wow. And the word out of my mouth, and my wife sees this. She thought somebody died. My face dropped, and I went, "When?" And like, "When did they die?" She thinks, "When did they die?" And he goes, "You're back. When you get back, you're going to rehearsals. 2 weeks after that, you're on stage on Broadway in Rock of Ages." I'm like, I hang up the phone and my wife goes, "Who died?" I go, "No, I'm in Rock of Ages." But I was like, oh, I never did that before. All right. You got to figure it out. You said yes, figure it the hell out. And that's been really the key to things. Just say yes. Okay, back to Washington. They invite me down. I said, all right, yes. What do I got to do? You got to defend rock and roll. Well, and I just got into it. I'm a reasonably intelligent guy and started really woodshedding and working on my speech. And Joe Gerber, who was my tour manager, a rocket scientist. He graduated as a rocket scientist at Columbia University and came to work for Twisted Sister of all things. He and I just like for 2 weeks, we just worked at that speech and turned it into a sharpened stick to poke him in the eye with when we got there. But again, I wasn't trying to testify. It just came to me.
Wow. So then, but that's the thing though. So how do you balance? And this is what I always kind of think about myself. You were a trailblazer. You were disruptive. You did a lot of great things. You're about freedom. You're about everything that's right about this country. Right now, a lot of things are changing. Right, and now you and I are the old guys looking down. Right, how do we maintain, hey, certain standards, but not be the old fuddy duddy and because there were guys who probably looked at you were like, who the hell are these guys? And then you blaze the trail. So how do you kind of look not down, but look at like culture now and say, you know what, I respect this and I don't respect that. How do you kind of balance that out?
Well, okay. Hold on. Are we back? I'm waiting for you. I'm waiting for you. We froze. There we go. We froze for a minute there. Am I with you? You got
Yeah,
me?
got you, D.
You got me.
Okay,
Okay.
we're good.
You know what? First of all, I'm pride. I'm proud of the fact. I pride myself in the fact that
Oh, crap. He froze a little bit. Hold on. Hold on, everybody. He froze a little bit.
I'm gonna try and relocate. Are we still here?
Okay. Yeah, now
No?
you said I try, and then I went out, but we're actually good now.
Well, okay. I'm gonna go inside just to be a little closer to the internet, just in case it's a problem on my end.
Take
You for a walk, people. Well,
yeah, we got to see the house. No, everybody's excited to be here.
This is where the house we built in.
Yeah.
Here we are. We're in the house. Okay. So find a seat here, and thank you. We're still. I make everybody like sick. People are running to the bed. Made a cigar session after.
Yeah,
interview like this.
I'm not allowed to.
Here we go.
Today, she'll let me. I think.
All right. So now we're inside. So I was saying was that when I look back, I realized that everything I stood for in the 80s, everything I spoke about in Washington, everything I've sworn by, I have lived and still believe today. So anybody who accuses me of becoming a curmudgeon or something like that, that's just really convenient to say because he's an old guy. I'm not, and most of my peers, they look back and go, well, I was young then and I was stupid. No, I still stand for what I stand today. And I get people on social media saying, you've changed. You used to be the rebel. You used to be this, you used to be that. And I go, no, the fact is you've changed. You used to be the rebel. Now you're right wing. And now you think that screaming fire in a crowded movie house is freedom of speech.
Yep.
It was never freedom of speech.
Yep.
You could never, legally by law, you could never say something that could hurt somebody, that was a lie and could cause bodily harm to people. That was never freedom of speech. I said, I have not changed at all. You've swung over and become this extreme righty. And I've always been a more of a centrist, socially conscious, but a centrist at heart. Some people call me the voice of reason, and I like that title. But anyway, yeah. So I just got to be. I am who I always was. Yeah. And when I talk to young people, the only thing you can do with young people is try not to be too lectury. That's the tough thing. You know what I mean? Because you remember, you're like, you know what, I was an idiot. I was young, dumb, and full of at one point, and and I'm glad that, and I understand short attention span, and who cares about the news, So I get that. I didn't either. So I was too busy watching MTV and wrestling back in the 80s. So I actually, when they asked me to testify in Washington, I actually had to go study. Like, okay, I kind of know what they're doing, but what's going on with this Washington Wives? What is this PMRC? If I'm going to go in there, I better figure this out and go in and speak intelligently.
Yeah. Well, the other part is a lot of people. And
why are people popping in and saying we should be smoking cigars, we should be drinking bourbon? I think I'm not the right guest for this show.
No, you know what it is. So I've there's a lot of comments coming through this. We're at 260 people still on watching, and you can pop in comments. I'm getting a lot of comments, and I have a little ADD. But when my wife's comments come on, I want to get proof that she's allowing me to have a cigar after and a bourbon after.
Oh, that's your wife.
Yeah, so when she gets pissed later, I can show her and say, "Hey, babe, you said it was okay." I ain't stupid.
Okay, me neither. 45 years in. I know a smart man when I see one.
So what's the secret to marriage? I mean, that's another thing that I think you could share as well.
You know what? I just performed a wedding ceremony the other day for a family member, and it's great they have a celebrity person, but also a guy who's been married 40 years, and I'm definitely a fan of the institution. I believe in the institution, and I just and they always to a man or woman say, so what's the secret? What's the secret? I could tell them so many things, but the main one is it's not set it and forget it.
Yeah.
It's always a work in progress.
Yep.
The only constant is change,
Yep.
and you got to change together or you will fall apart. And and remember the words at the end that everybody sort of takes for granted: the part for better, for worse,
Yeah.
in sickness and health,
Yep.
till death do you part, richer and poorer, death
Yep.
do you part. We sort of skip over those words, and those are the toughest ones. When someone gets sick, when someone loses all their money,
Yep.
and stops being able to provide for his family. And my wife started working in a hair salon. She just went, okay, I'll go to work. I never thought for a second she was going to leave me, because she was
Yeah.
there when I had nothing, and she was just always been there for me. But it's that kind of partnership. It's something you always got to be working at.
Now, but the other thing though too is you can sit back in that beautiful house and hat, glasses, and kind of hang out. But you're doing a lot of cool stuff right now. We got a big audience. We're going to share this. A lot of people are going to see this. And I work with Dee, so to be transparent, but we also became friends. You got a lot of good stuff cooking. I want you to share some of the updates that you have, because it's really exciting.
It gets boring. I sound like look, people don't get bored or going, oh, this guy's annoying, because he's like the Energizer Bunny. He doesn't stop. But take it more as, I would hope, inspiration than anything else. I view life and career as, I call it, the Christmas tree farm. And when you're in my business,
Yeah.
which is entertainment, so when you're a self-starter, you're
Yeah.
self-employed, you can't just plant Christmas trees, grow them, cut them down, and sell them, because then you got nothing else to sell. So every year you got to be planting more trees,
Yeah.
so that every year you've got new trees coming. So there are things that I can write. I started writing in the 80s, screenplays. It took me a long time to master the craft. I've
Yeah.
sold things. I've had things produced. And as a result, I've got a couple movies now that are going into production, and that I'm going to be directing.
Nice.
So this has become a career for me.
Nice.
But I've also started I've got a children's show that's over at Peacock right now, called
Nice.
Monsters Rock, that's in development, an animated show that I co-created.
Nice.
I've got a holiday special called The Rock and Roll Christmas Story that's over at Stupid Buddies, stop motion animation. That's in development right now. I've written musicals that have been staged. I've finished my first novel, Frats, which we're going to publishers with. I said I'm directing my first movie, My Enemy's Enemy, that's being worked on right now. So I've got so many different, and I still do radio. I've been doing House of Hair for 26 years.
Yep.
I've been doing that forever. I do voiceover. I'm the voice of the Reels Network show called Breaking the Band.
Yeah.
So you can hear me narrating those shows. And by the way, I don't write the scripts, so don't send me angry emails. Matter of fact, I don't even see the whole show. And but the show itself, they're pretty good. One thing I vetted them. They stick pretty much to the truth. They're not trying to misinform people or make people look bad. And I'm pretty pleased with how fair they are. As a matter of fact, they did Twisted Sister, Breaking the Band, and the show's about band breakups.
Oh,
so
wow.
I get notice we're doing Twisted. Now I'm the host, and they're doing Twisted Sister, Breaking the Band. So I called the producer. I said, let me get this straight. I'm narrating a show about a band breakup that I personally broke up. I said, what the hell parallel universe is this? So I said, look, I get along with the guys. I'm totally cool with doing it. I told the guys, I said, listen, be honest. There's no retribution. I was a dick back in the 80s. I get it. I've apologized over and over to you guys. And they put a camera in the recording booth, so they at least allowed me to react when people were calling me an a-hole. I was, they had me in the studio, like, listening, go, what? So that's a very funny episode. But yeah, so I do that, and I do a lot of different things like that. So I mean, there's more. I'm sure I'm forgetting stuff, because again, it's the Christmas tree farm. So I have some baby projects. Oh, and the weirdest thing of all is that my wife she got power of attorney over her father's real estate empire, and he unfortunately got dementia, and it was handed. All these properties were handed off to her, and she's a hairdresser, makeup artist. Fortunately, again, I'm the smart rocker, and I actually am capable. So I've been running all of this, doing all these negotiations and buildings, and all these lawyers are going, is this the guy from Twisted Sister? I'm like, yeah, shut up. Right now, I'm the guy telling you we're not going to take it. We want more money. We want more money.
Oh man, I love that. Now, you hear sometimes again having two super worldwide songs and sustainable songs. You hear, oh, we got flown into here for this, bar mitzvah, or like, where's the craziest place you guys were brought to, or people came to you, where you sang one or two songs, and because they always hear there had to have been something where you got approached one time and they paid the freight, and you guys showed up, or you showed up and sang a song for something almost either egregious or something kind of a little out there. Have you ever had that experience, Dee?
Well, it is my life's dream to turn my career into Tony Bennett's career. Sing San Francisco and go home. So I just, I've been slowly whittling it down from 2 hours to 90 to 75. And if I could just get it down to, we're not going to take it anymore. Thank you. Good night. And go to my room. That's my goal. So I'm trying to think of where. We played. Twisted retired in 2016, and I've continued to do some solo stuff. But we did shows, and I remember doing one in Bolivia, La Paz, Bolivia, It's the highest altitude city in the world. And we arrived in the afternoon of the show. They opened the doors, and suddenly everybody was like, I can't breathe. It turns out the air is so thin that soccer teams take 3 days to acclimate. And we were going on in like 5 hours.
Wow.
And we walked into a situation. Well, it turns out that Bolivia is a heavy metal country. And we played the biggest show of our lives in a football stadium. And we had to stop after every song just to there were people oxygen masks on, and our crew was passing out. And it was like insane. But that was one of the more insane places to play, La Paz, Bolivia. Yeah.
Wow. Now, you always, again, you're doing well for yourself. You're the smart rocker, of course. Where do you land on where you're placing bets now? You're a crypto guy? Are you more conservative? Give us some feedback to the viewers and what your thoughts are on different type of asset classes.
After losing everything in the 90s and getting it back in the 2000s, I am terrified. I have the scars, riding that bicycle and sitting at that desk job and having people ask me if I was me and lying. I remember one time, my wife used to do makeup. I'm being totally honest. It's easy to be honest from a place of where you returned, but also people need to know we fall down. And we meaning we all. And the thing is getting back up. My wife was one of the things she'd do when she wasn't working at the beauty salon. She would do makeup and hair for brides on weekends and pick up $100 cash. So I would go to wedding, these fairs they have at catering houses, and flyer cars.
Oh, wow.
And I remember running through the parking lot, being chased by the security from the catering hall. And I was running not because I was afraid of going to catering hall jail, but I was afraid they would recognize me and say, what are you doing here in the parking lot putting flyers on cars? It was so pathetic in many ways, but like I said, whatever you need to freaking do, you do, So, but I have this incredible fear of that happening again. So as successful as I am, and I could retire easily now, I just find I get offers and I say, I'll do that. Yeah, I'll do that. Well, what do you work? I'm working on a new show. I'm working on a new idea, because I'm just afraid that something's going to happen. And the Bernie Madoff scenario, seeing that go down in the world, all my investments, all my money is just safe, simple, no risk. I don't want any risk. I want no chance that the world fails, that I am going to be broke again, because I've been there once and it was scarring. It made me a better man, but I'm still scarred to this day. So when it comes to crypto and things like that, leave that to the young and insane. To me, anything that doesn't have something behind it, and people say, well, what about, they took the dollar off the gold standard, but it's still the United States government, a physical entity. You could say, this is the man in charge, and this is where it is, and this is where the money, this is what their value is. And so, but when it comes to crypto, nobody can seem to give me those answers.
Yeah.
Like, what's behind this? And they
What
go,
you
well,
doing?
the spirit of it, of commercialism. Oh
Yeah.
yeah, that's not going to do it for me. So, but my kids are into that.
Well, let me ask you this though, as a follow-up question is, don't get me wrong. I grew up like one of six, the youngest, not the oldest, and father left when we were young, so we didn't have a lot growing up. Sometimes I have a scarcity mentality, which you probably have as well, because you lost everything.
Yeah.
Have you made a big mistake by not doing something, maybe an IP you could have got in on, or an investment or opportunity that, like, you could have been the fifth Beatle, like anything that was so big or something that was big enough that you're like, fuck, you're like, I know I have a scarcity mentality, I'll be okay. But Jesus, if I did this one thing, it would have been much different in terms of finances.
There's always things that you could look at and say, if only I had done that or done this. But I try to live my life. The one thing I don't want to have is a lot of regret.
Sure.
And so I don't sit there looking back and saying, oh man, there was opportunity I missed. Oh man, that was a mistake. And I just say, once that I move past it, I just keep looking forward. And and I just have been that person that do what you know what you're good at, and don't try to. Well, that's not necessarily true. That's a lie. I just lied broadly and openly, and I'm realizing because I've decided I wanted to be a writer, and I spent decades practicing writing, and I decided I want to do voiceover, and I hit the streets until I became a top paid voiceover guy. Decided I want to do radio, and and again, as my agent at the time said, just because you're on stage at an arena doesn't mean you can walk off stage into a six-figure radio gig.
Yeah.
And I worked at doing a metal show on Sunday nights for $3.70 an hour, and I was doing everything. I was the engineer, I was the producer, I was talking to the promo people at the radio stations, I was booking the interviews, I was doing everything. Yeah. But now I've gotten to the point where I'm a six-figure radio guy. Yeah. But you again, so I just lied broadly. I have done things that weren't there, but you have to be prepared to put the work in. And right now, with some of those other things, I didn't put the work. Wasn't willing to put the work in on those.
Which brings me to Dee is a very hands-on guy, but you need a team, right? So like you now have a team behind you. You're doing a great job. Did you always have a good team around you? Did you always, post bankruptcy when you kind of calibrated, did you always have a strong team behind you? And like, for example, now, would you have picked the same team you have now, maybe 10 years ago? Because I know you need a team and you have a strong team, but you're also very hands-on. So I want to get a little bit of experience about how you picked your team, and are you good at picking teams, and how do you pick them, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I'm not good at picking teams. Our first manager, and I won't get into naming names or whatever, but he signed Twisted Sister. Nobody wanted us, and he was just a local promoter, and he wanted to get into management. And we thought, wow, he's a local promoter. He can get us on the bill. And he did, with Blue Oyster Cult at the Nassau Coliseum. And we opened some shows, but he really had no managerial experience. He was learning on us. So we didn't have that ace manager. After my second time around, I just sort of started to work with people who we actually, in my group, they say get people who drank the Kool-Aid. Yeah. And that's because the people who work with me, they know that what I'm capable of, and they sort of had but most of the world doesn't. So they go, oh my God, this guy can do anything. Yes, I can, except be like the handsome lead in a movie. I can't take Ryan. I'm not going to take Ryan Reynolds' role. Trust me. I don't exceed myself. But they see that, and they're so enamored with it. And that's Phil Carson, my manager, and Danny Stanton, my agent, and Ron Starantino, another agent that I work with. But the rest of the world hasn't drank the Kool-Aid. So a lot of times it's fighting an uphill battle to convince people that he's the guy. Now, I never disappoint, and when I get in there and, I'm in a show on Broadway, and I did quite well. I mean, reviews were great, and I did not embarrass myself on the stage on Broadway for 3 months. But, there were a lot of people who wouldn't believe it. Like when I said I can sing opera in Rocktopia. And they said, you can sing opera? And then I started, and then in rehearsal, I sang, and it went, oh my God, he can sing opera. So nobody in the crowd believed I could sing opera. And then I started singing opera. They go, oh my God, that freak can sing opera. So he really is a big freak. So I tend to surround myself with people who believe in me, who believe in the product,
Yeah.
And who I've developed a trusted relationship with over many, many years. And all those people you've dealt with, Danny and Phil Corson, decades and decades of working together. So I don't know if that's the best case scenario, but it's worked for me long term. So.
Like it. We got a few wrap up questions, and again, appreciate your time, Dee. So you could have dinner with 3 people, dead or alive. Who are they and why?
Wow, that's a tough one. I mean, really tough. Mark Twain.
Oh wow.
He is one of my favorite authors of all time. I've read everything he's written. He just fries my brain how he can go from just drama to comedic writing to one of the book Innocents Abroad was basically him journaling a world that he sent to the Herald Tribune, I believe, a world travel trip he went on, and it was just so intriguing and so interesting. So I would love to and he would just go around and speak publicly and get paid an incredible amount of money just around the world, just speaking to people. That's how he made his money for a while, besides writing books. So Mark Twain. Who else that's alive or dead? Well, that's another writer popped. I just go with what popped in my head. Gene Shepard. Gene Shepard is one of my biggest radio inspirations. He's an author, and the world knows him. I used to listen to him as a kid as the guy who narrated and wrote A Christmas Story. So he's one of my biggest influences as a radio personality, especially talk radio, and my writing style. Anybody who knows Gene's writing style, and not a lot do, they'll go, dude, you're like, that's Gene. This is Gene Shepard right here. You're Gene Shepard. I go, well, he's dead and he's not doing it anymore. So somebody needs to carry the torch. So he's a real. I would love to meet him. And I guess the other one that popped in my head, oddly, is because of all my vocal heroes, he's the one I haven't had a chance to meet with, and the Bon Scott from AC/DC.
Oh wow, okay.
Because he's one of my biggest. He was like the last piece in the Dee Snider voice puzzle. There was Alice Cooper, and there was one of them, and Rob Halford and Dio. But Bon Scott, when I heard Bon, I was right before Twisted really started to hit their stride, and I was like, oh yeah, man, I really got to get up there, get up there in the nasal area, and really fight. The dirty deeds, not that cheap. It's got to be all up here. And I sing a hell of a Highway to Hell, by the way. If you ever hear me do my AC/DC, I've got it down. But I never got to meet Bon. I met Alice, of course. I met Ronnie, James Dio, and Rob, and all these other great heroes of mine. But I never got to meet Bon.
That's awesome. With your armchair MBA, we try to also focus and unpack kind of the business aspect. So I guess our last question before we wrap up is, if you had to start all over and you went into business, what business would you start and why?
Does it have to be business?
Or how about to start your career over? How about that?
Oh yeah, if I had another go at it, and this is not a regret-based decision. This is like, well, I'd like to try that. Pro football player.
Oh wow.
I couldn't play sports in school because our family didn't have money. So I was, from the age of 12, I was, whether it was peddling newspapers or mowing lawns, you had to have an allowance to go out for a team. And if you want, and had no pocket money, I bought my own clothes. I mean, I didn't buy my parents, it was Goodwill stuff. It was real hand-me-down, so I didn't get a chance to do the sports thing. And I'm pretty athletic. And matter of fact, one of my proudest moments is in high school during gym class, and the captain of the football team stopped me and said, "Why didn't you go out for the team?" And and I was like, I remember that to this day. I was like, because I believe I wanted to, but I couldn't. So if I could do it again to take my the path of a pro football player, I'm ready. Put me in, coach.
Yeah, I was a freshman year in high school. I was a 3-sport guy, but then we had an opportunity to work pretty much almost full time outside of school in a pharmacy. I walked there. I think I was like 13 years old or 50, whatever it was, right? And I didn't go to the next year's practice for football. Coach came up to me and said, "Well, why didn't you see you at practice?" And I lied to him. I said, "Oh, my knees bother me, blah, blah." I couldn't because we couldn't afford to.
And if I did something, you said something you were ashamed to say at the time, but you've risen. And again, I said, it's great to share that with people because it's easier once you've risen above it or come back from it. Because that's the stuff that made you the man you are. I just saw Will Smith talking in an interview. I also saw a clip of him the other day, and they talked to me about that he had a pretty hard life growing up, and he said, "I have no regrets because it's everything that made me the man I am."
Yeah.
And my father, who was one of my great muses for all the wrong reasons, he was such a hard ass and so tough on me and made me miserable. I hated his guts. But a few years ago, we're close now, and I thanked him.
Wow.
I thanked him for making me, because I look around and I realize I've gone way easier on my kids, and I don't think they're necessarily better for it. I never wanted to be that dad that my dad was, but he made me strong. And the reason I succeeded in all these battles, and I still succeed going up against ridiculous odds, Twisted Sister, 10 years to make it, 10 years. And that was because my father prepared me for war, and I so, yeah, it just, thanks, Dad. And he's still around. So if you see this, Dad, thank you.
God bless. Send it to him and tell him to look at just over an hour. I just want to hit about the lives. I'm about to wrap it up, and I got a good question from my man Gator. What was your favorite film of all time?
That's tough. Okay, I can't give you that, but we'll give you in categories.
Okay.
The Unforgiven.
Okay.
The Unforgiven. Silence of the Lambs.
Wow. Okay.
Okay. In the horror world, The Exorcist, and in the comedy world, it was Animal House. But in modern days, I'm thinking Tropic Thunder, maybe the new Animal House of its day in its own bizarre way. So I gave you 4. It's not, and 2 of them are kind of horror-ish.
Yeah.
So, but you know what? I will go with The Unforgiven being like, I've been going to see that movie 3 days in a row when it came out. I was so just blown away by the story, but also the way it exploded all the myths of the Old West and played with the accepted good and accepted evil. If you remember, he was Clint Eastwood was the outlaw, but he was now fighting for the right. And the sheriff, is played by Gene Hackman, was a former outlaw, and he was using the badge to do wrong. So I mean, I just love that.
Wow, and the kind of juxtaposition of doing that, being the lawman but doing the wrong thing. Well, Dee, listen, this has been an honor. It's been a pleasure. I'm always happy to spend time with you. I'm going to put links, but how do we find you? Obviously, we're going to put some links, but if you want to steer them towards your preference, Twitter or whatever, how can we find you?
Well, recently I straightened out my website, so it's very clear, and all people can go to DeeSnider.com, and it's Snider with an I. My last name is not a proper noun; it's an adjective. I'm Snider than you are. So, so go to DeeSnider.com, and there's links for everything. And then I'm on Facebook at Face Dee Snider, Twitter at DeeSnider.com, and Instagram at DeeSnider.com. At Dee Snider, no.com. Sorry.
Yeah, this is why, Dee, real quick, this is why you're smart, right? I'm not blowing smoke. You send them to the website, and it's all there. Most people are like, oh, on Twitter, you can find me here. And they send it for 20 minutes. You know what? Yeah. DeeSnider.com. I'll drop the link. Dee, I'll have you close this one out, buddy.
Hey, man, Tom's great talking to you. Thanks for having me on. And everybody's been sitting patiently sending out questions and things like that. Sorry about that. I can't have a cigar or a bourbon, but I think I'll go have a nice cup of coffee after this interview because, as I told you, I'm a 3-pot a day man.
And
more pots. Love
it. Thanks, Dee, and thank you for being on the Armchair NBA.